This is the key to 16.2 Part B, and in this on this worksheet you're solving each quadratic equation by using quadratic formula. You must use quadratic formula for each of those. Even if it's factorable, you have to use quadratic formula. So first of all, remember when solving a quadratic equation by using quadratic formula, it's got to be first of all in standard form. All right, so it must be in standard form. And so remember, standard form is where you have ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So all your terms on one side, zeros on the other, and make sure it's in descending order. And then the quadratic formula is this. So once it's in standard form, then the formula is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. And make sure that this whole expression is being divided by 2 times a. All right, and then remember a, b, and c come from these numbers right here. So a is a coefficient of x squared, b is a coefficient of x, and c is your constant. Okay? So if you look at number 1, so first of all, is number 1 in standard form? No, number 1's not in standard form. So I got to put in standard form. So I got to have 0 on this side. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. Okay? So I get 2n squared minus n, a negative 4 and a negative 2 is a negative 6, equals 0. Once you have it in standard form, let's talk about what a, b, and c are. So a is the coefficient of n squared, so that's 2. B is a coefficient of n, so that's a negative 1. Okay? And then c is your constant. That's a negative 6. So you have to first of all make sure that all these a, b, and c's are correct before you substitute into your formula. Otherwise, all this work will be for nothing. Okay, so now let's substitute into the formula. So the formula says the opposite of b. So b is a negative 1. The opposite of negative 1 is a positive 1. So n equals 1 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So b is negative 1. You put that in parentheses. Otherwise, you're probably going to mess up. Put that in parentheses. Minus 4 times a is 2, times c, which is negative 6, all divided by 2 times a, and a is 2. Okay, equal 1 plus or minus the square root of negative 1 times itself is 1. All right, a negative 4 times 2 times a negative 6. So negative 4 times 2 times negative 6 is a positive 48, right? So that's 1 plus 48, all divided by 4. So 1 plus 48 is 49, so I get 1 plus or minus the square root of 49, all divided by 4. Now remember, you want to simplify the radical whenever possible. So if you look at 49, 49 is a perfect square. So what's the square root of 49? 7. So I get 1 plus or minus 7 divided by 4. And notice that if you look at what you have, you don't have any square roots anymore. 49 is a perfect square. So I'm going to end up with rational solutions. So since they're the rational solutions, I expect you to go further with that. So you're going to say 1 plus 7 divided by 4, 1 minus 7 divided by 4. And then 1 plus 7 is 8, so 8 divided by 4 is 2. So that's one of your solutions. Make sure you don't leave it as 8 over 4. You got to know that 8 divided by 4 reduced is 2. And over here, 1 minus 7 is a negative 6 divided by 4 reduce it as a negative 3 halves. Okay, so that was number 1. Number 2 is already in standard form, so let's talk about what a, b, and c are. So a is 1, the coefficient of x squared, that's a 1. B is a coefficient of x, that's a negative 4. Okay, negative 4. And c is your constant, which is 20. So putting that into your formula, you get x equal the opposite of negative 4, which is a positive 4, plus or minus the square root of negative 4 in parentheses squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a, which is 1. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 times itself is 16 minus, okay, negative 4 times 1 times 20 is a negative 80, all divided by 2. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 80. So 16 subtract 80. is negative 64. Okay? All divided by 2. Now you got to remember that the square root of a negative 1 is I, so you have to use that fact. All right? And then if you look at the square root of negative 4, do you all agree the square root of negative 4 is the square root of a negative 1 times 64, right? And the square root of a negative 1 is I, and what's the square root of 64? Well, that's 8. So that just becomes 8i. So that's 4 plus or minus 8i divided by 2. And then reduce. So now I'm going to have imaginary solutions now. Imaginary solutions. So here I had real solutions that were rational. Here those are not real solutions. All right, those are not real solutions. So you get imaginary solutions. Okay, but I can reduce this because both terms of numerator both divisible by 2. So that becomes 2 plus or minus 4i. So 2 plus or minus 4i. And if you want to, you can write this as 2 plus 4i, comma, 2 minus 4i. Okay? All right, number 3, it's in standard form. So it's in standard form. So let's talk about A, B, and C. So A is 3, B is 4, the coefficient of x, and C is your constant. So C is negative 8. So I get x equal the opposite of b. So if b is 4, the opposite of that's negative 4. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 4 squared, minus 4 times a is 3, times c, which is negative 8. All divided by 2 times a, which is 3. So I got negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4 squared, 16. Now a negative 4, use your calculator if you need to, a negative 4 times 3 times a negative 8 is a positive 96. That's 16 plus 96, all divided by 6, right? So then I get negative 4 plus or minus the square root of, simplifying the radicand, 16 plus 96 gives me 112, all divided by 6. All right, so that's where I'm at. Now remember the directions that say simplify radicals, so you got to go further. Now is 112 a perfect square? No. But can I simplify the square root of 112? I don't know. Let's see. Let's think about it. So the square root of 112, right? Let's think about that. Let's go right here. Square root of 112. What I would do is I would start with 4. So it's 112 divided by 4, divisible by 4. Yep, 28. But it's at the largest. Because what do you notice about 28? 28 is 4 times 7 in it. So what's that 4 times that 4? 16. So 16 is the largest. So it'll be the square root of 16 times, so let's do this again. So 112 divided by 16. Always use the largest. Always use the largest. Times 7. And so that's 4 times square root of 7. So that goes here. So that's negative 4 plus or minus 4 square root of 7 divided by 6. Now I want you to notice this. Negative 4, 4, and 6. Can I reduce those 3? Yes, because they're all divisible by what? 2. So that's going to be, so let me go ahead and put that here. So negative 4 plus or minus 4 square root of 7 divided by 6. So all those are divisible by 2. So negative 4 divided by 2 is a negative 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that goes here. So it'll be negative 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 7, all divided by 3. So that's your solutions. So if you want to, you can write it as negative 2 plus 2 square root of 7, all divided by 3, comma, negative 2 minus 2 square root of 7, all divided by 3. Okay? All right, and then finally, oh, and notice that so here you had 2 real solutions that were rational. Here, those were imaginary solutions. Here, since 112 is not a perfect square, these are irrational solutions, right? So irrational solutions. So those are going to be irrational solutions. So meaning that your answer cannot be written as a fraction that looks like this, an integer divided by an integer. Okay? All right, so number 4. So it's already in standard form. So A is 2, B is a coefficient, so remember, A is a coefficient of x squared, so that's 2. B is a coefficient of x, so that's a positive 1. And C is your constant, which is also a positive 1. Put it into your formula, you get x equal the opposite of b. Well, b is 1. The opposite of 1 is a negative 1. Plus or minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 1, all divided by 2 times a, which is 2. So I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 times itself is 1. Okay, negative 4 times 2 times 1 is a negative 8, right? All divided by 4. So I get negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus 8 is a negative 7, all divided by 4. Now remember, I can deal with the square root of a negative 7. The square root of a negative 7 is the square root of a negative 1 times the square root of 7. And the square root of a negative 1 is I. Now I cannot simplify the square root of 7 because the only perfect square that goes into 7 is 1. So I'm going to have to leave it as square root of 7. So this becomes negative 1 plus or minus I square root of 7 divided by 4. And notice when we did 2, we asked ourselves, are all these divisible by, if I look at 4, 8, and 2, what they all have in common? They all had 2 in common. When I looked at 4, 4, and 6, they were all divisible, negative 4, 4, and 6 are all divisible by 2. But here, if I look at negative 1, and that's 1 right here, and 4, they're all divisible only by 1. So we're done. Now, if you want to write this as 2 separate solutions, you can. You could say negative 1 plus the square root of, negative 1 plus I square root of 7 over 4, comma, negative 1 minus I square root of 7 over 4. Okay? All right, so that was the key to section 16.3, part B. So just make sure you know how to solve quadratic equations using quadratic formula. Notice it's important that you understand why these are rational solutions, why these here are imaginary solutions. These have i's in it, so that makes it imaginary. If they don't have if they're not imaginary solutions, that means they're real solutions. And real solutions are either rational or irrational. Okay? All right, so that's the end of this worksheet.